Hi, everyone. Welcome to Liberty Chats podcast, a podcast out of the Steamboat Institute. My name is Ericka Andersen, and I'm so excited today to be talking with our guest, Philip Wegmann. Thank you so much for joining us, Phil.
Well, thanks for having me, Ericka.
Yeah, well, some of you might recognize Phil's name because he is one of our Tony Blankley Fellows, and he is the White House Correspondent for Real Clear Politics. How long have you been in that position, Phil?
So I've been at Real Clear since 2019, and Steamboat took a chance on me when I was on the editorial page of the Washington Examiner. So it's really surprising now to say that I've been covering the White House going on 3 years now, but it seems like just the other day I was in Steamboat with all of you.
Yeah, and actually our history goes back even further, I think, to when we were both at the Heritage Foundation. So it's been full circle.
Very true. I think I was an intern there when the Daily Signal was just getting started.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing comms, right?
Yep, I was in comms, so I was there too. So were you at the launch party at the, I don't know where we did it, but it was a big launch party.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. Well, let's talk about back in the day, actually. I would love to hear a little bit about your career trajectory and how you got to where you are right now.
For sure. So I went to Hillsdale College and I majored in history and political philosophy because, like every other liberal arts student, I thought that I was going to grow up to be a lawyer. And thank goodness that I didn't. I think I took a practice LSAT and realized that if I wanted to get into a good school, I'd have to do a lot of studying my senior year, and I decided against that. And I sort of backed into journalism because I had a class with John Miller. I think it was Intro to Political Journalism, and then Sports Writing, and then the semester after that, Advanced Writing and some other things. But I love to write. I thought it was so much fun. And more than that, though, what I really enjoyed was starting out from the premise of knowing what I didn't know, of trying to figure out, okay, what is the question that needs answered? What is it that I know we don't have a good answer on just yet, and that answer will lead to all sorts of different implications on X, Y, and Z. And it started out as a radio producer. I was going to be a courts and cops reporter in rural Virginia, but I ended up taking a job as a radio producer in DC. And I just kept seeing all of these reporters and journalists come on the show, whether it was Betsy Woodruff or John Dickerson or J Mart. I kept thinking to myself, like, they seem like they're having a whole heck of a lot of fun. I need to make the plunge and get into reporting. There was a job open at the Daily Signal at the Heritage Foundation. Our good friend Rob Bluey gave me a call, and I got to work for them for a little less than a year. Then after that, before the 2016 election, I went to work for Tim Carney at the Washington Examiner, where I did some investigative work, and finally, Real Clear Politics. And I think that, so I graduated in 2015. I guess I'm going on 7 years, and it feels more like 7 months.
So I have to ask you this: Hillsdale itself is known as conservative leaning, and so are the other outlets you mentioned, including Real Clear Politics. So tell me how you decided to kind of move in that direction rather than something more mainstream.
Well, I'll have to disagree. Otherwise, my editor will give me all sorts of trouble. At Real Clear, they clearly don't pay me for my opinions, and they take a lot of pride in the fact that the outlet is nonpartisan. We link to both the left and the right, and certainly there's no ideology that influences our polling average. So that's straight down the middle, whether it's in the stories that I'm pitching or the copy that I file. But yeah, I don't think anyone would be surprised that I have a conservative perspective on things. And I went to Hillsdale and I worked at a number of these more conservative outlets. I think some of that was a product of the fact that that's where the opportunity was. The barriers to entry were pretty low. Earlier in my career, I worried that working at some of these more right-leaning outlets was going to cause trouble. I thought that would preclude different sourcing opportunities, that folks wouldn't talk to you. And to an extent, that comes with the landscape. I'm certain that my colleagues on the left probably feel the same way. But the truth is, when it comes to journalism, new information is king. And I think that what I've been able to do thus far is, when I'm talking to the White House or when I'm talking to any of these Democratic campaigns, they're under no illusions that I, rolled out of the Center for American Progress, or that, I'm going to copy and paste like Vox.com. I think that what they know, though, is that, maybe the flavor of the question that I'm going to ask is more conservative, but the report that I file is going to be fair. And that's what I think is really lacking from journalism today. I mean, no one pays me for my media criticism, but I'll give it a crack. I think that you have a lot of these legacy news outlets that are both at once beholden to their subscribers, and yet they still want to carry on as if they are the objective paper of record. And that's where you get into trouble. Perfect objectivity is impossible because we're imperfect human beings. We're always going to bring our own, biases, and we're always going to bring our own perspectives. But I think if you acknowledge that you do have a perspective, or you acknowledge that you do have some biases, but then you set up guardrails to make certain that you aren't just doing confirmation bias on a daily basis. You set up your own guardrails. You're open and honest with your audience about where you came from or the questions that you asked, and then you make certain that your own preferences don't flavor the story. Then I think that you're being more honest with your audience. And then I think you're being more honest with your sources. Perfect objectivity is not possible, but fairness always is.
Yeah, and I would swing back on your point about Real Clear Politics. I guess what I should have said is that they're one of the few outlets that actually has both sides, which is what we need more of.
Isn't that crazy that such a simple thing is now just sort of, everyone's thinking, oh goodness, what if we did have people on the left and the right, differing perspectives, or people talking to one another who actually disagreed. I mean, I think, Ericka, I'm really interested on your thoughts on this, because something that my friends will tell me, it happens probably, once every 2 or 3 months. Someone will send me that old Crossfire clip where it's Tucker Carlson is, he's sort of confronted by comedian, not John Oliver, he's from
Jon Stewart.
Jon Stewart, thank you. Yeah, and Jon Stewart says to Tucker Carlson and his left-wing counterpart, well, why can't you guys just find areas where you agree? Aren't you part of the problem? Crossfire is terrible because this is just performative hackery. This is what's wrong with politics in America. And on a superficial level, it's kind of true. You've got Team Red versus Team Blue, and there is a little bit of melodrama where each side says the other is the worst. But if you rewind the clock to 5-10 years ago, the idea that you would have left and right engage with each other, and maybe it wasn't always good faith. Maybe it was, not even 75% or 50% good faith. Maybe it was just 30 or 40. But the fact that there was even a kind of dialogue in the opinion space, compared to today, that's pretty remarkable. That doesn't happen today. You go to Fox News or you go to MSNBC for the echo chamber that is going to reinforce your priors. And I think that's something that's truly lacking. And so one of the editors at Real Clear Politics has a really simple line that is easy to sort of gloss over, but his advice to anyone who tunes into a podcast or reads an article of ours is to go to Real Clear Politics, find something you disagree with, and read it or watch it.
Yes, that is what we need more of. And that reminds me, I think it's so funny that I think when I moved to DC way long ago, I won't date myself, Tucker Carlson actually had a show on MSNBC, which is shocking information nowadays. As the bigwig at Fox News, you can't believe that he would ever have been on that network. But things have changed for the worse, in my opinion. And of course, at the Steamboat Institute, we are all about that dialogue. That's what we're doing with our campus liberty tours and all of the things that we do. We will bring in anyone from another perspective that wants to debate and dialogue and talk, because I think that's so healthy for American democracy and for so many issues that we have. You have to tell us a little bit about your experience working in the White House press room. So we have seen you, Phil, we have seen you on TV raising your hand, asking the hard questions of Jen Psaki. So tell us what that experience has been like. And before Jen Psaki, I guess you were in there with when Trump was still in there. So what has that been like? And, is it nerve-wracking when you raise your hand to ask a question, when you know it's on national TV?
Well, so in both administrations, more and more, I just find myself sort of being not frustrated with the administration during those briefings, but being frustrated with other reporters for asking the same question again and again and again. And obviously, there are great reporters in there. I appreciate, a lot of my colleagues. And I'm certain, you and I could sit here and come up with a pretty decent list of folks who I think do the job pretty well. But something that is tiresome is when you hear the same question asked again, but just a different outlet and maybe a little bit of a different premise, or worse than that, some of these larger outlets asking questions as if they were perfectly reasonable and there was no other perspective, and just not even acknowledging that perhaps the premise of the question reflects not mainstream thought. And I think that's really a disservice, and that's why a lot of folks who were really surprised by Donald Trump in 2016 are likely going to be really surprised in 2022 or 2024. But anyway, I just raised my hand, keep raising it, hope that I can get Jen's attention or Kaylee's attention. It was funny though. Earlier this month, President Biden, he had his second press conference, and I was lucky enough to be in both the first and the second press conference. This White House, they're much more scripted when it comes to their comm strategy. They're really disciplined. The president isn't going to just shoot from the hip like Donald Trump did. It's much more regimented. So, whenever I've been able to ask him a question, it's not been because I've been on a list. It's been because I've sort of, I don't know, maybe boxed the system a little bit. And so I always try to make eye contact and raise my hand or get his attention. But this last press conference, I asked him a question that kind of got under his skin. I started asking him about his Georgia speech, specifically his comparison of Republicans who opposed his voting reforms to Bull Connor and Jefferson Davis and others. And the point of the question was I was trying to pivot and ask, how do you expect to work with those same Republicans now when they feel aggrieved? But before I could finish my question, the president sort of erupted at me and yelled a little bit, sort of insinuated that I should go back and read, and that maybe I couldn't read. But anyway, I walked out of that press briefing, and my thought was, wow, both presidents that I've covered have ended up yelling at me. I'm either doing something right or something terribly wrong. So
I think you're doing something right because you're asking hard questions, which is the whole point of having, people reporting directly from the White House. So, have you enjoyed covering one or the other more, or are they just very different?
The barriers to entry at the Trump White House were lower because they were more entrepreneurial, and that if you had an idea and you could push an angle through 3 or 4 administration officials, chances were good that was going to get back to the president or his inner circle. So if you pushed again and again and again, hey, someone should write a profile on Ivanka Trump and see if her pivot towards populism is real, if she actually cares about flyover country, or it's just good PR for someone who really is the elite of the elite. I mean, this is someone who comes from power zip codes, who went to a power elite university, who inherited massive wealth. When she talks about American carnage, does she mean it? When she talks about these internship programs, these training programs, does she really mean it? We should sit down and have a conversation with her. and sort of starting that drumbeat again and again and again, eventually it would get you somewhere. And so I was able to interview and profile Ivanka. I was able to sit down with Trump in the Oval Office, Pence on Air Force Two, and then write some stories that the previous administration was not happy with. I mean, frankly, it was a target-rich environment. With this administration, with Biden, it's much more regimented, and they're more professional in sort of the DC sense, in that if they're going to leak, they're going to leak in pursuit of a common goal. They're all on the same page. But one thing I'll say about Jen Psaki, who I really appreciate the current press secretary, because I know that my audience might not completely agree with her. I know that my friends and family might not completely agree with her on everything, but I appreciate that she is unafraid to come to an outlet like Real Clear Politics, which is not going to ask a generic run-of-the-mill question. And I appreciate that when she sees you raising your hand, not just here or there, but keeping it up constantly. When she sees the dozen or so emails that you send every single day looking for an answer, I think Psaki, which is different from some of her Obama era colleagues, is she appreciates hustle. And if she sees someone hustling, she's going to interact and respond. And I think the Obama era folks were more of the opinion, at least according to the other journalists that I've spoken to who covered them, they were of the opinion, well, we talked to the Washington Post and New York Times, and we left the Wall Street Journal on red, and we talked to a couple of networks. That's the story. That's fine. We don't need to engage. This White House, not so much. And I think that flows from Biden, who is more slightly more populist in that sense, maybe less elitist. But yeah, I mean, if you like every answer a Flack gives you, and you're a journalist, well, you're not a journalist anymore. You're
right.
You're an advocate. You're involved in advocacy. And certainly, I've disagreed with both Kayleigh and Jen. But I will say, I guess to sum up the difference, one was like the Wild West. The other's more like a WeWork.
Yeah, I think we can all understand that, having gone through 4 years of Trump and now a couple of years of Biden. Well, Phil, I feel like we could talk about so many things, but we have come to the end of our time. So thank you so much for giving us a little peek inside your world at the White House. I'm sure there's probably a lot of very serious press conferences coming up over the next few days, given what's going on in the world. And for those listening, thank you so much. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a rating, review, and share.